Hello, hello, hello. How are y'all doing tonight? It's Tuesday night, which usually means it's live stream. Yay. I am going to set a timer because I'm having a flare this week, so I'm trying to be good about my bedtime. Welcome, everybody. Congrats on being the first. Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, I guess people are just being quiet tonight. I don't know. But we're all here. No worries. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, hopefully this will be a good conversation. I was thinking about, a couple of things. Well, I guess we'll get into it, but you've seen the title. You have an idea of what we're here to talk about. Hello. Hey, Josh. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, so I wasn't quite sure how to title stream tonight, but I was thinking about, I was watching Jess, as I do, it's my weekly tea church. I don't know. I always watch her tea videos. There's one up last Saturday, a few days ago, and she was talking about the Dear Publishers thing that they've started, I think, on Bookstagram, asking Simon and Schuster to take down some of the books that they had planned to publish, or to not continue publishing or distributing certain books. And between that and a book talk, I saw this kind of topic of like publishers as some sort of like neutral space. I don't know. It just made me think. And I was going to do a discussion video, and then I was like, well, this might be more fun just to do with the team. So, hello, team. Hello to everyone. Glad you were here. So, like I said, I thought this might be interesting, just conversation with you guys. Pretty chill. I got top shelf La Croix tonight. This is the Curate cerise limon, which means cherry lime. So, bougie bitches up in here tonight. So, like I was saying, the thing that made me start to think about this was Simon and Schuster's letter. So, like, there's been a bunch of push within Simon and Schuster, and then publicly from outside forces as well, calling for Simon and Schuster to not distribute a book that one of their client publishers had planned to publish, which was a book from one of the murderers of Breonna Taylor. And there was a lot of backlash against that, but there's also already been backlash against them for moving forward with publishing, I think, Mike Pence's memoir. And then I think also, I want to say they were the ones publishing Kellyanne Conway. I know everything I need to know about her from Claudia on TikTok. So yeah. But so the CEO of Simon and Schuster published this letter. And one of the things that he talked about was like, basically, I probably should have looked up this letter before I got on here. This is all from recall, so I apologize if this is not exactly correct. But he was making a point to the effect of, it's our editorial and sales force's job to evaluate books and determine if they have something to contribute to public conversation that is of interest and is, something new that we need to hear. I know that we have published, this was addressed to his employees, so he's like, I know we published books that probably all of us at some point have thought, I don't agree with this, but this is part of what we do here in this business, as we bring these public voices to the table. So I was thinking about that. The other thing I was thinking about was, I think it was Nisha Sharma on Book Talk, who was making a point, and I hadn't thought about this, but this is true, So the New York Times bestseller list, if you know anything about how kind of the sausage is made there, it is not just like a straight up pull of what the best-selling books of the last week have been. It is a curated list that is often influenced both by sort of the, let's call it the editorial discretion of the New York Times, which is their right. But I don't know if this is official public knowledge, but like, let's just say it is widely speculated at minimum that publishers pay to get certain placements on the New York Times. And also different public interest groups also pay to get placements there. For instance, on the topic of political memoirs, often political like PACs and stuff will pay to try to get their candidate's book on the New York Times bestseller list. In contrast, USA Today's bestseller lists are much, I think are exactly what the bestsellers of the last week are, to the best of anybody's ability to discern what that is, or it's at least much closer. So part of the point she was making was just like, it's such a statement of what publishers value and what, journalism values, that Jennifer L. Armentrout, whatever you think about the trilogy, the third book in her very widely popular trilogy that starts with From Blood and Ash, I think it's called the Gilded Cage, the Cage of something. There's a cage and there's gilding. I don't know how those words go together in the title, but those are the components. Was far and away the best-selling book last week, and she was number one on the USA Today bestsellers list. So Nisha was making a point just basically about like what publishers value, and the fact that even though romance pays the bills or is a very material part of what keeps publishing in the black, there's just basically still a perception that there's a lack of prestige and a lack of respect there. So with those two things in mind, I just thought it might be interesting to talk through, like, is what the guy from Simon & Schuster saying, is there any way that that's valid? Like, are publishers neutral? I don't know. Those were the two kind of impetuses of tonight's chat. So hello. If Pence wants to publish a book, can he just do it independently? Yes. Okay. Here's the thing. Well, actually, I'm going to pause. I'll come back to that. But I think that is an important part of the conversation. Also, I agree with Heather. I don't stay for Nigel, but Nigel is definitely an enticement to help me happily stay watching Jess. Simon & Schuster is also apparently publishing Josh Hawley, who, in my opinion, is should just be remembered as an insurrectionist who is a traitor to this country. So there you go. It's just my opinion, but that's how I feel about him. This is a good point. Do they really think people will buy those books? This gets into the whole, like, in theory, yes, they move a lot of copies of those books, but do those books get read? I forget if Jess was the one talking about this or if I saw this on TikTok. This is a good point of, like, people, a lot of these political books, especially conservative ones, they get purchased in bulk, but they don't necessarily get read. Sort of like an open secret in publishing. So anyway, I want to go back to this idea of, like, Pence being able to publish independently. This is part of why whenever people get, like, all butthurt about people getting their publishing deals pulled, if you have enough notoriety that your book will get pulled because of public outrage, usually that means you have enough notoriety that you could easily hire some people to help you do a very professional, independently published job, and you would still make a ton of money. So I don't really buy this whole, like, people refusing to publish as a form of censorship. So that, I think, is one strike against this idea of, like, well, publishing needs to be neutral because otherwise it's censorship to some degree. I think that argument in the past may have been much stronger, but in the year of our Lord 2021, where independently publishing things is completely a legitimate and viable route for people to go, I just don't think that holds water. The Republican Party doesn't like him anymore. I don't know. There's still I don't know. We'll see. Hey, Heather. through eBay. Oddly fascinating. He's a special one. A Crown of Gilded Bones. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was what I was struggling to remember. Yeah, I think publishing is a business first and foremost, and we could get into like a full-on detour here through like the problem with this idea of benevolent capitalism. There's a philosopher name. A philosopher is a falafel that a philosopher eats. There's a philosopher named, I forget his first name, but his last name is Zizek. And one of his major kind of like thoughts, or one of the things I guess I know him best for, is this idea of benevolent capitalism actually being the root of a lot of ills of capitalism. And basically what like the reason that my mind goes here with this, we have this idea, especially in America, that we can have ethical consumption, or we can be ethical. We can use our money, our dollars to vote on things. And I do think that to a degree, like in some ways, intuitively, that's how I feel. But I appreciate Zizek's kind of critique of that, being that this idea that there are good for-profit businesses under capitalism perpetuates the overall ills of capitalism. So like some of what I think sometimes I see book community, like the book community, crying out for is some version of a more benevolent capitalism from publishers. And I just don't know that actually helps. To some degree, maybe this is very nihilistic of me, but I feel like to some degree, I think we have to make our peace with the fact that all consumption under capitalism is to some degree unethical, and specifically with respect to book consumption, publishers just want to make money. So yes, like it's very hard for me to reject the impulse to try to like shame them into doing things better. And I guess I won't stop trying to do that. But there is always in the back of my mind this idea that like there is no such thing as an ethical publisher, really, who is for profit. Because at the end of the day, that is what will drive their decisions, period. Happy Tuesday. I'm okay. I'm flaring, so I'm struggle bus, but we're getting there. I hope you guys are doing well. Should publishers be neutral? No, all art is inherently political, and saying nothing is taking a stance for the status quo. This is where I tend to fall, because the reality is, okay, I'm tipping my hand that this is where I'm going, I think, eventually in this conversation, just depending on how conversation goes. But the kind of like argument or the direction that I do want to hold space for, and I do think that sometimes in the book community, we have this isn't our impulse. What I'm about to say is going to sound like very centrist, and I don't mean it that way, because I actually think the valuation of like being in the center is a real like blight upon modern society, because it's this idea that like somewhere in the middle is always best, and I think that that's like a fallacious place to start from. But I will say, like, the other sidiness of this, I do think that there is value in having different opinions, having a platform to speak a good faith version of the argument that they're trying to make, especially like vis-a-vis certain political figures of note. So for example, the Pence memoir, if the Pence memoir is not him just sort of like bootlicking the Trump supporters he lost and trying to like get back in their good graces and like just, defenestrating himself onto the streets, trying to get people to get back on his court. If that memoir actually had like true insight into the behind the scenes of how certain decisions were getting made and what he thought about it, I could see that actually having value for public discourse. And I would see maybe artistic not so much, but in terms of like a public informational good, I can see an argument of like, this is actually saying something. I do think, though, a lot of these like really political memoirs, and this is on all sides, are just like such pandering swill that it's like, okay, if you're gonna publish something that's pandering, at that point I'm like, well then like be choosy about who you publish, because not all people deserve to pander. And why are you giving certain people a platform to pander if you think that what they're saying is antithetical to basic human decency and rights? And I guess, again, like I'm tipping my hand here, but I agree. Like, I don't think there's such a thing as being neutral with this kind of business of publishing. I think it's hard, at least, to really hold that position. So I would only see some value in that kind of a book if that book really is actually adding something to public discourse. Like, for instance, I listen to certain podcasts where all the conservative David Brooks, David Frum, various folks like that will come on. And I don't agree with them, but I appreciate them being on those platforms because it's a good articulation of a position I disagree with. And I think that there's value in hearing from that voice, so that either I can nuance my disagreement, I can have like biases I may have either confirmed or recontextualized. Like, I think there's value in that. But those are people who are actually having like something meaningful to say in opposition, as opposed to just like swill. Feeling very salty tonight, I guess, being more candid than I normally am. Welcome, Annie. I'm glad you could make live. In my lifetime, every other president has gone back and forth between Democrat and Republican, so the idea that publishers won't publish an entire political party doesn't make sense to me. I can see that, but I do, like I was saying, for me, I don't think it's a matter of like, I never publish somebody with this opinion. It's more about like, is there something substantive that is being said? And if not, if all you are doing is supporting somebody, like basically having another revenue stream and you're going to make some money off of it as well, to me, I see that as ethically compromising. But to the original point, under capitalism, like your number one ethic is to make money. So, yeah. I don't think that they can be neutral. Yeah. I had my first dose of the vaccine thanks to Dolly. Go Dolly. So we'll be popping in and out. Well, welcome. Yeah, Heather, this is borne out in what is known in the industry that conservative groups buy those books up en masse to read them and pass them out at pep rallies, but they don't really get read. And actually, I think, at least here in the South, if you go to used bookstores, it's very evident. You can see like an entire like row of conservative books that look like they've never had the spine cracked. This is a good point, though. I think it's worth talking about that it's the danger to set a precedent about refusing to publish certain things. It's maybe not in the cases we're talking about, maybe not applying, but that's the thing. I do worry. Like I said, I think in the age of independent publishing, I worry about this less, but I do want to hold space for there being something to the idea that I don't know that I want people whose primary motivation is profit to be making the decisions about who is entering into the biggest sphere, like the most prestigious, which I don't know if I love that value judgment, but whatever, like the most elevated sphere of book publishing that we have. Like, I don't, who gets to make those calls? I don't know if it should be them, but it ends up being them. And therefore, I guess I want them to make better calls. Maybe that's kind of part of where I land. This is an interesting idea. I feel like they should be neutral and not publish books by recently active politicians or political figures. It seems to be another way for them to make money instead of helping the public. And yeah, I think I just think that they are primarily motivated by money, which as publicly traded companies, they're required to prioritize their profit for their stakeholders. Like that's their raison d'etre, is to make money. So I can't, it's like I don't want to criticize them per se for doing what their raison d'etre is, but I do think if I guess I'm bearish on the idea that we can really meaningfully influence people whose primary motivation is money. Hey Alexa, I can tell you anecdotally based on what I know from friends who work at SNS that they make the vast majority of their money from nonfiction. Which doesn't justify those deals. I'm also big mad, but explains why they're more willing to push the envelope on nonfiction because that's where they're making a lot of their money. That aligns with things I've seen speculated. That's part of why I think they want to take this position of like, well, we publish people who we don't agree with on all sides. And I think, well, okay. And again, I'm sorry, like you clicked on this, so you knew what you were getting in for. Can't wait to see the comments on this. I do think particularly in 2021, so how deep do I want to get into this like little side tangent? Like I was mentioning earlier, I think that there is this feeling, or there has been, particularly among a certain older generations in America, because of the political atmosphere that they grew up in, that there is this real value to compromise at all costs, sort of, or finding a middle ground, and that, hearing from all sides. Basically, there's like this neoliberal value of like all voices deserve to be heard. And there's a part of me that agrees with that to an extent, but I think that is contingent on the idea that all parties involved in discourse are good faith actors. And I think after the last 4 years, but even if you don't want to go there and just say after the 6th of January, to act as if we live in a society where everybody is a good faith actor, I think is willfully obtuse at this point. So like, I don't think that the same rules apply. Like, again, going back, there's people I disagree with politically who, like, I think we could have a good faith argument. Hell, I live in Nashville, I live in Tennessee, like, I encounter these people on the reg. And because part of why I moved back to the South was because I was like, if everybody who's a little bit, anybody who's to the left leaves the South, it will never change. So I am willing to have those kinds of good faith arguments regularly with people who I vehemently disagree with. But as long as we're coming from good faith, and as long as like everybody's being respectful, I will do that. But like, I just don't think someone like Mike Pence can be classified as coming from a position of good faith. Even if he believed all the same things he currently believes, if he wasn't supporting fascism, maybe I could be more open to the idea that he deserves a platform. I don't know. So, excuse me. I'm just getting very sassy tonight. Oh, sorry, the chat popped here. I'm trying to go back to where it was. Yeah, I mean, I think I somewhat agree with this, Derek, this idea of not shaming people who want to read it. If the book actually contains something of substance, I can get on board with that. But I just think the chances of this book actually being substantive in some way that meaningfully tells you something about Mike Pence that you don't already know, my guess is that is very slim. So I guess we'll have to find out when the book actually comes out. Yes, Karen, thank you. You're getting exactly to what I'm trying to get at. The fallacy of neutral publishers is the same as objective journalism, the idea of false balance. That false balance, I think, is a really good way. That's the idea I'm trying to drive at. I think that there is a whataboutism or a both sidesism that has been very dominant in the way that a certain generation of Americans, I can only speak for America for sure, have been taught to think through a subject of like, well, but like, that's your side, what's the other side? And I think that there are certain things in the era that we've entered in where it's like, there is not really a good faith other side. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So this idea of like false balance, I think, is a great way to put language on that. I feel like a lot of people who work in publishing and want to believe it's good because literature is art and a lot of people write their stories for the love of it, but businesses can't run on love. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think there's a lot of talented and really good meaning actors in these different publishing houses. So like, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody who, I mean, again, literally look around me. I'm surrounded by the products of the businesses we're talking about. I have an entire hobby based on the products we're talking about. I'm not trying, like, I think this is a very morally complex topic. But in terms of like the business of a publisher, I just think trying to hold them to some sort of standard when they are trying to make money is potentially a fool's errand. Yeah, I was complicit, exactly. Pandering money grabs is, I think, how, yeah. Yeah, Heather, I agree with this. I would assume that political contemporary memoirs are almost entirely read and bought by people who support that public figure. I would say not entirely, but I think largely. Whereas in contrast, and again, this happens to be with a political figure with whom I agree more than Pence. So like, take this with a grain of salt. But from what I've heard about Obama's memoir, there's a lot of meaningful, like, real discussion of like how decisions were made and what was going on at different points. So of course it's like got a slant because it's his perspective. But even if you disagreed with Obama, I think you could learn something from it in terms of his perception of what was going on. That's my understanding of that book. So like, even if you disagreed with him, I could see more of an intellectually honest argument about why there is public value to publishing it. Whereas he, like, almost every politician I think has this. It's like their book that they publish right before they're going to run for office because it's just them, like, it's just like a complete PR piece basically, but as a book. That's more what I think. It's like, I don't think you can really just say you're being neutral. Unfortunately, publishing can still make money off trash people. Let's see here. Yeah, and I do, like, I want to say that there is space for good faith discourse. Like, and sadly, I don't know if books are the best way to do that anymore because of just like who ends up consuming books for the most part. And maybe I'll just leave that there. But I wonder if, like, frankly, like podcasts or like certain YouTube channels are a better way to engage in that kind of conversation. I don't know. I would prefer a more transparent set of values from a diversity of smaller publishers to the illusion of equal opportunity neutrality for massive publishers, but guess that's not happening anytime soon. Yeah, like there are definitely like small niche presses that have very explicit mission statements, and a lot of times they're not for profit. And like, in some ways, I would love that to be the model. I don't know that there's a way to actually make that happen. But I think that could be a move towards a more ethical book creation environment, or at least like if somebody was like, let's put it this way. If there was a publishing house whose position was that they are trying to be like politically neutral, both in terms of like nonfiction they publish, and we actually haven't, and we should circle back around to like fiction, like things that are neutral or not in fiction. But like, let's just say that was somebody's mission statement. I would take it more seriously if it was not for profit. Like if what they were saying is like, we truly believe in this sort of like neoliberal whatever of like whataboutism and both sides and like fair balance. So that's like what we're trying to do. If it was not for profit, I would take that more seriously. I don't know. This debate has made me think of the controversy surrounding Jordan Peterson's new book. I am not aware of that, but hopefully Jess will cover it soon, and that way I will know. Let's see here. Lots of good conversation here in the chat. Yeah, I mean, Conway, I think, I think that one's like an even more clear cut of just like, this is somebody who, like, you have video evidence is, even if it's not punishable or will not be punished because of the connections this person has, is like abusive to her child online. Like, you could see it. I just don't know why you would support her apart from wanting to make money, which, again, if that's your raison d'etre, I get it. Yeah, I think this is a good point. This is part of why I'm like, I don't know that I really want publishing to be in charge of, like, so maybe the neutrality thing is beneficial from this perspective of it's dangerous ground to want or expect publishers to not publish certain POVs or political or otherwise folks. Power changes quickly, and next time we may be on the downside. I think that's a point well taken. Like I said, I do feel, particularly with respect to some of the political stuff, and I know we've been focused on that because Pence was sort of like Pence, and then Breonna Taylor's murder, his deal, sort of occasioned this topic. So I know that we've been focused on that a lot. But when it comes to the political aspect of things, I do feel like this is a different moment in history than like the mid-90s. So I just think certain of these decisions have a different kind of political freight to them, or sort of like emotional freight. GOP cash grab books are fundraising gifts. Yes, that is a good point. Basically, we need to collapse capitalism. I mean, I think we need to minimally revise how it is expressed, in this country at least. I think there's a sliding scale. No shameless cash grabs that support racists and murderers, and racist murderers. Select political figures, it gets shaky. Yeah, and I think that's the calculus that a lot of these, the folks running these different places are making. And I don't know really what the answer is, because if you stop, like if I just said like, oh, I'm just not going to buy anything from a Simon & Schuster author anymore, well, I'm punishing that author, I'm publishing all of the people who work at the company. So it's like, this gets into the whole, like, when companies boycotts different states when they have certain laws that go into effect, there's always, it's like, it feels good to do it in a certain way because you're like, yes, I disagree with this, and like, we're pulling out. And like, I think there's also an ethical argument of like, I do not want to put, for instance, North Carolina's bathroom ban for transgender people. I think there's a really legitimate position for companies to say like, I don't want to send any of our employees to a place where I can't be confident that they're going to be treated well. Like, I get that. But at the same time, like, the people you ultimately are punishing are often people who had nothing to do with that decision, very probably could disagree with it. And that's kind of how I feel about these publishers, where they do things and I'm like, I want to rage, but then I'm like, well, but who am I really punishing? Like, I don't know. This is just why I feel impotent in the face of heartless capitalism. Like, I just don't know what you do. How neutral meritocratic do you think the gatekeepers of what you call the most prestigious sphere of publishing are? I don't think that they are. I think, and that's the thing, like, part of this is a really interesting point, because I would dare say, not all, But a really large chunk of people who make these decisions, with if you ask them what their political leaning, like again, let's just take the Pence one as an example because it's the easiest to make these points with. But like, okay, if you were to line up 100 people at Simon and Schuster, let's say that's the whole company, and you were to poll them on if they agreed with Pence politically, I would guess that in the context of the publishing industry, the vast majority of them would not align with him politically. But I think that's part of what makes us so insidious is that like, but they're not above making a buck off of him and like potentially furthering views that they themselves may disagree with. Does this make sense? So like, I also think that there's a certain kind of like storytelling that was happening in that letter that the CEO did, where he tells himself this story of like, well, I disagree with Pence, but I'm going to publish him because like, that's how we have like a fair and balanced discourse, when that's not the actual motive. The actual motive is to make money. So like, I think there can also be, thank you, you've helped me get to something that I was noodling on and couldn't find words to. I think there's also like a certain level of like hypocrisy in the sort of guise of neutrality, because it's this idea of like, well, I don't agree with him, but like, we're going to publish this book because that's how we have a free and balanced society, is that we hear from different people. And it's like, no, like, you don't think that there's anything meaningful probably in this book. You want to make money off of him, and you get to feel good about yourself, like putting in this letter that like, oh, we publish people from all different points of view. And it's like, I would rather you just own it. I think this is pretty fair, kind of off topic, but I refuse to read books by politicians because I don't trust them, even former politicians. Sure, there's exceptions, but I'm mostly thinking of former presidents. Yeah, I tend to feel like, I mean, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but it's like, I just don't know that I need that from presidents or from politicians in general, unless they're making a specific substantive policy argument of some kind that needs the pages of a book to really like dig into it. I don't really think that's possible, or not possible. I just think it's unlikely. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I think it's toxic to think that making money and being ethical are mutually exclusive, though. Like, I think if publishers could if they try, but are they trying? This is where, like, this gets into Zizek's thing of, like, benevolent capitalism. So I never gave the concrete example of this. The example he gives, which is the one that really, and I don't know this is why we're having conversations. I'm all over the place on this topic. The example he gives is that benevolent capitalism is akin to, and trigger warning for enslavement, or content warning, I guess, is the reason why American chattel slavery was perpetuated was because there were enough quote unquote good slave owners who treated their workers ethically, or like at least didn't, were not the most extremes of what we hear about of that period. And people could always point to those owners as, well, but like, look, there's proof that you can be ethical in this system and you can treat your workers well. It's like, that is what actually keeps the myth that slavery is okay alive, is those benevolent actors. So like, this is where I get really in my head, because like, functionally, if you're talking about an individual business, yes, like, I want to hold them accountable to making the most ethical decision that they can in that situation. But I also think it's impossible to not acknowledge that as a whole, it is a system that cannot be ethical. That's where I get tripped up, because again, going back to Zizek's example of enslavement, like, of course you would rather an individual enslaved person be treated well as opposed to not be, right? Like, obviously on an individual level, that's what you want, but it's the system as a whole that's a problem. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like where I always get caught up in my head in these conversations around like ethics in business, because I'm not sure it's possible, but I also don't want people to stop trying, because I think the world would be worse off if they stopped trying. So it's like, there's a hole in the boat. I don't want you to stop sloshing out the water, because then we drowned. but also like the boat is still this like is we're stuck in the situation. So yeah. Lovely light topic for Tuesday night, right? Kind of in the same arena, I read an article today, ProPublica, that said the Kindle self-publishing platform is enabling white supremacists. Don't know if that violates ethical terms of service, but doubtful. I don't know. Yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't heard that, but that makes sense. There are figures I personally find morally abhorrent, but I also think that money made off those books generating, yes, revenue to buy fiction from good people. And that's part of it is, okay, but does the shit ton of money you make off of the Pence memoir then give you enough? Basically, like in publishing, there's usually a few breakout titles every year that pay for all of the books that barely break even. So like, it is somebody from like a marginalized community or this really niche artsy book that probably isn't going to make a lot of money, but like deserves to be heard. Whatever. Like, do those books not get published if you don't kind of do these deals with the devil? I don't know. Again, I just feel like, I just wish they were more transparent about what they were doing and didn't have this sort of like narrative around what like this neutrality or we're, facilitating the great forum of different ideas. It's like, just say you want to make money and you want enough money to be able to like publish some things you actually really believe in. Like I would have more respect for that. I get that from a PR perspective. They can't just say that, but yeah. Oh no, the chat jumped again. Sorry, guys. Ah, man. Well, you guys have some great great points you're making in chat while I've just been like great points while I've been just pontificating here. Oh my gosh, I'm so behind. How is this possible? Okay, I think I finally found where I was. Yeah, Funko Kayla. I tend to agree. I personally draw the line at platforming people who propped up a fascist regime. No one is entitled to a multi-million-dollar book deal, and like Jess was saying, it contradicts their BLM equity statements. Yeah, this gets into what I was talking about earlier of like, I do, yeah, this gets, I just think I could more hear this, like, I want to hear from both sides ism in the 90s when, like, literally we didn't have an insurrection at the end, like, during an attempt at peaceful transfer of power. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. Hello. Okay. People joining in late, but you are always welcome. I feel like before publishers say they will publish anyone, they should pay attention to the percentages of trans authors, BIPOC authors, LGBTQ plus authors they actually publish. Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's part of what the solution is rather than focusing like on not platforming certain people, they focus on who they want to platform. So like having like reconstituting the way they think about it in a more positive frame of like, who's here? Here's who we do want to platform. I don't know. And I just think this idea of putting out these statements that you don't really believe, but they're just PR moves. Again, I think that may have worked in a certain era, but frankly, I think like younger millennials and Gen Z like just don't buy it. So I don't know. I just hope that ghostwriter still gets their check. Point well taken. I think it's utter nonsense when people say we need to hear both sides, because oftentimes both sides know how the other sees it. Yeah, and I mean, like, I hear, yeah, well, and this is a great, you mean tell me anti-racists don't know what racists think? Yeah, I do think, like, hearing well-articulated versions of things I disagree with, I can learn from, not because I'm going to be persuaded, but I can learn about what that person is thinking. I don't think that that's work anybody should be expected to do, especially on topics of race, but like there can be value in that. I just don't think someone like a Pence is really actually bringing any light or like elucidating anything. I work for a small press, and as much as I'd like to believe that the publishing business is fine and dandy, we have to acknowledge and try to tackle the flaws. Yeah. Yeah, this is probably like the bottom line. We don't really need a full hour, but if everyone theoretically has the opportunity to publish, all we can do is support or denounce certain publications and try to hold publishers to a higher standard with their publishing and hiring. Yeah, and I mean, hiring is a great point, because a lot of this also starts with like who's at the table making these decisions. You know, like I think that's a well-known root cause here. Also, this is fantastic. One person's Facebook post is not equal to another person's PhD. I love that. I don't know if that's Carrie, if that is originating with you, but if so, bravo. Both sides tends to really mean la la, I'm not listening. Yeah. A Pence podcast, no. But see, I think that you would actually learn more from that if he like sat down for a podcast where he didn't have the questions ahead of time and someone could really like sit there and like poke at him. I think that's better than like some sort of swill that he gets to, you know, curate for us. Best way to make your point with businesses is to take your money elsewhere. Yeah, and I mean that's the reality. Like functionally, that's what I try to do, is like support the books that I believe in, but that's just like I just don't think long term it's enough, and I get real in my head about it, as you can tell. Yeah, what grinds my gears with KAC in particular, though this applies to several others who got deals recently, like don't give books to raging abusive personality disorders, right? Yeah, for real. Yeah. I think this is a good point that there are just so few publishing houses now that this gets more and more difficult to navigate, because like really, where do you go? Where do authors go? Okay, hopefully we don't get another tornado. Sorry if I lose power. Yeah, there's just like not that many publishing houses. So, you know, if you're a professional in the industry and you want to keep working in publishing, there's only so many, you know, games in town at this point. So, yeah, exactly. Oh, this is a good point, Shay. I find translated works bring a lot to the table when talking about political topics. Yeah. And I really appreciate, like, one of my favorite groups to hear from on American politics are expats, because I just appreciate the perspective that they bring, especially ones who, like, are living here. So even if I disagree with them, I do, like, Yasha Monk, I always enjoy listening to him. I really disagree. I think he falls into the sort of, like, fair false balance thing too much for my taste. But, I do appreciate at least hearing. I like hearing outside perspectives, because especially like as an American, I can say this, like we are just so guilty of like not of like being in our own little bubble and being just, I don't know. We're special people. So I appreciate people kind of giving reality checks. And I really appreciate people who bring a lot of history to their analysis of political topics, because, and that's, I'm sure, just bias on my point, because I love history and I just find history so helpful. I really appreciate people who can contextualize what different political moments are like in the context of past political moments. So, yeah, and Lydia, I think this is right. Part of me wonders if refusing to publish certain political figures would not really have any effect. Many politicians could afford to publish their own books and it would still be a bestseller. And that's part of why, like, I do find the choice to platform them and to publish them to be particularly problematic, because I don't think it is censorship to not publish them, because they could have bestsellers without a traditional publisher. So, yeah, BookTube Goddess, I agree. I mean, they can, but they have to be like, there's lots of great like political science about how boycotts can be effective, but I don't think they often are. Oh, this is a great point. In the Book Riot podcast this week, the host mentioned Son of Sam law. Criminals cannot make money off of their crimes. If politicians broke laws, then they shouldn't be able to publish a book. Yeah. Yeah, while other authors would be initially hurt, those authors would put pressure on the publishing house. They would eventually have trouble getting new authors. Change takes time and pain. And that does remind me, also at Simon & Schuster, because to Alexa's point, they do a lot of nonfiction. Do you guys remember last year? Maybe not last year, but I'm not sure. 2020 is such a just void in my mind. Probably 2019. Simon & Schuster, one of their imprints was going to be publishing Woody Allen's memoir, but they also had published Ronan Farrow's Catch and Kill. And if you don't know, Ronan Farrow is Woody Allen's son, at least on paper. And he completely stands with his sister, who has accused Woody Allen very credibly of abusing her as a child. And he was like, WTF, like, I can't believe you did this, and like took a very public stand against it, and so did the employees. And I believe that they retracted, or like they broke that book deal. I think I should check whatever happened with that, but yeah, I mean, it is possible for authors to try to take a stand. The vast majority of lower level employees, C-suite, is where it gets dicey. That's exactly right. Let's see here. Yeah, this is also a good point of like having a book on the New York Times bestselling list can give somebody more legitimacy in other areas. I suppose for me personally, boycotting a product or brand is not really about the punishment for the company itself. I think that's probably a really healthy way to look at it, is it's about what you personally want to engage with, not expecting change to come from it, but just like where you want your own money to go. Yeah. Rather, for certain places, it's about me being part of a wider effort that would have some form of leverage to convince a brand or company to change. Yeah. If it was so free and balanced, wouldn't every author be offered the same compensation, publicity package, etc.? Well, coming with the hot takes here. If I read a politician's memoir, it's because I have a heightened interest in them, but rarely do I expect much substance, especially when in office. Yeah, for real. And I mean, even like Becoming by Michelle Obama, while I did enjoy that book, it is very jarring in that book, because when she gets to her life as the first lady, there's just such a drop off in the sort of like vibe of candor. And I'm sure, like, I get why that is, but it does make for less substance. So I don't know. Oh my gosh, I didn't hear about this. Tuning in late, but the guy who's been yanking my chain lately is hillbilly LG guy JD Vance, now tweeting about supporting Tucker Carlson and attacking companies boycotting voter suppression. I wish I could say I was surprised. I will just say, as somebody from Appalachia, that book is pretty roundly like despised. So I don't know. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think this is when I was talking about Zizek, similar to the "Can there be good cops when the organization is corrupt?" It's like, yeah, I mean, I think, I know that there are good cops, but it's, if you were in a system that you have some awareness is fundamentally broken, like what are the ethics of that? Then again, like every workplace is fundamentally broken. Then again, not every workplace has the power of literal life and death sponsored by the state over it. So I don't know. You literally just in real time saw my like ping ponging of thoughts on most things. Let's see here. The profit motive in itself does not allow for the limitation of exploitation. There are always ways to limit harm, but the setup has harm built in. Yeah, that's really well said. Yes, Lindsay, this idea applies to patriarchy too. Benevolent or soft patriarchy pointed to as the reason why it's ethical. Yes, or real. Sorry, guys. I'm just reading through all your wonderful chats. There's so much good conversation that I'm not going to be able to get to, but I appreciate everybody's thoughts. Yeah. It's really hard to judge if all the good that comes out of the publishing world outweighs the bad. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I agree with this, Priscilla. In terms of like functionally, I do think that there is something to be said for a business following up on a stand with actions and investments in that cause, something that they don't seem to be doing. Oh, yes. Then you have brilliant books from university presses that get little to no money at all, even though they contribute so much to literature. That is so true. And I mean, like, you guys in every chat now, I have to talk about my textbook, but like, I am, I would love to support even more academic books about genre because, like, I really enjoy that as like a version of nonfiction. And, maybe that's not changing the world, but it is enriching my thought life. But those books are like prohibitively expensive for most people. And so like so few people ever really get access to them. And it's not fair. Okay, here we go. But if it's true that publishers pay money to get on bestseller lists, are the sales of those controversial memoirs, political convicted criminals, etc., really sell that many and getting read? Some of them I think are selling that many. I don't know that they're all getting read. But that does come back to the other kind of non-political point I was making, but just like in terms of what publishing values, like, and again, maybe to that kind of like patriarchy point somebody made. The fact that romance never makes New York Times list, to me is like indicative of people's value system in the publishing, which is, and what's her name? Is her name Jennifer Weiner? The one who really who goes after Jonathan Franzen at every chance she gets, which frankly I support. But she, I think has made this point, maybe not always like the most elegantly, of just the fact that the coverage that romance or just like books aimed at women, the coverage that those get in major publications that cover books is completely inequitable. And like books that people are actually reading in very large numbers, it's as if they've never existed in what is, at least for America, our paper of record. And I think there is something to be said about like publishers. Why are you never putting the effort or paying for the placement that you would need to get I don't know, maybe not Jennifer L. Armentrout, but because I think she was independently published or small press pub, but like, I don't know. The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. It's got the third one coming out. It's been very anticipated. It's coming out in August. My guess is that it will, by the numbers, be one of the best-selling books that week when it comes out. Will the publisher pay to have it get the coverage that a book in a genre not aimed at women would get? I doubt it. Oh, sorry, that triggered me. that alarm noise is so awful. Okay, so that's my reminder to start to wind down. So we can go for another 10 or 15 minutes, but yeah, I think we've got to start also with having like more like different people at the table. Who's at the table? It may be good for book industry workers to develop a corner of the industry that's more democratically run instead of investing in these large corporations. Yeah, like creating a new and better table. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I don't know. The times are changing, so who knows? Um, yeah, and as an expat, it's very eye-opening to hear other people's perspective on the U.S. and the difference in the international news perspective. For real, when I lived in Canada, I pretty much got my news only from either the CBC or the international service of the BBC, and that was very perspective shifting for me in a way that I think was really healthy. Um, yeah. Yeah. Yes, to that point though, it has to be this is to the point of like, can the author stand up and try to do something? It has to be a powerful author with leverage. Anyone else, you only harm your career and it does nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think if there was some like authors union and like all the authors who were under contract tried to do something together, probably maybe that would work more. But yeah, I think it took the fact that Woody Allen's son was also an incredibly powerful man who had a very recent huge bestseller was very instrumental. Hachette pulled out of publishing Allen's book and he claimed censorship and was going to be published elsewhere. Yeah. Of course he does. His book is all about white people struggling too. Oh, love that. Yeah, this is a good point. Not giving criminals book deals, and especially in a time when we as a country are grappling with how we feel about criminal punishment system more broadly. Yeah. Um, Everybody's agreeing that yes, we should support university presses. Yes, they're so wonderful. They're so expensive. It's really disheartening. And I get why they are, but yeah. If authors did it en masse, it would do something, especially if it was paired with widespread boycotting. Ugh. JD Vance has been floating the thought of running for Senate in Ohio. Blech. Sorry. You're getting all my unvarnished opinions tonight. Sorry. I should probably have said that up top. All things being discussed, obviously, is from my own opinion only. Nothing should be construed as fact. Blah blah blah. I work in a prison library, and the true crime section is the largest nonfiction section. It gets major play. Wow. Well, I think it's awesome that you are helping them get inmates get access to library. That's awesome. And I don't know how I feel about the fact that true crime is so big. Yeah, this is a good point, Lydia. Watching Bridgerton have its moment on Netflix and then the book getting super hyped was so interesting. I saw Shondaland on a review of a Beverly Jenkins book and Daydream Forever. Oh my gosh, please, Shondaland, give us an adaptation of Tempest. But yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like, a great example of all of these people watching the show and being like, oh, I like this. I would read that. And like having it essentially like normalized and destigmatized. Yeah. But yes, exactly, Anya, because people think media aimed at girls and young women has no intellectual value. And this is a great point. I feel like Sarah J. Maas, as much as this person personally hates her newer work, has done a lot to push romance and new adult and the likes to the forefront of publishers' mind. She single-handedly has created that landscape to me, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely predecessors, but yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think seeing the numbers that those books did certainly has given space for other books to be published that probably wouldn't have gotten the same push. Yeah, Heather, I mean, I didn't want to say it, but like literally just Google a picture of young Ronan Farrow and young Frank Sinatra and you tell me what you think. So, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Do you have any antiquarian books on your shelves? I recently found the gloriousness of them, and now I'm curious. Do you mean just like antique books? I do. None of them are in this room, though. I have some early, and I think one first edition of C.S. Lewis. I have a couple of early editions of Sayers, and oh, and then I have a poetry book that my grandma had when she was a little girl. Oh, this is a good point. The University Library gives out the cards to anyone. I'd look into your local higher education institutes if they have similar stuff. Well, hey, I live like right near Vanderbilt, so I could pop on over there. Yes, Josh, thank you. I wish university presses had more audiobooks. Yes, I wish this too. Did I actually catch up? Antique. Okay, yeah. I caught up, guys. Aren't you so proud? Okay. Well, yeah, so all this to say, is publishing neutral? I think not. And I think I would rather them just kind of be honest about like their motives in publishing some books that they themselves acknowledge don't align with what I don't know. I don't think it's neutral. And I don't think that neutrality is necessarily a value. I just don't think it's necessarily valuable, like to the social discourse. I have visions of some of my professors narrating my textbooks. Oh, yeah. What do I think of public libraries carrying these controversial books? Like, I would rather the library, like, yeah, I would almost rather, like, certain, like, I would be okay. I'm trying to think if I really believe this. I think I believe this. Like, if all politicians were not allowed to actually publish something for profit, but, like, they had to publish it and it was only going to be available through the library, I feel like I'd honestly be down with that. Because then I feel like it would, quickly root out the people who didn't actually really want to, like, communicate much with their book other than, like, propaganda from either side, frankly. And like make some money off of it. So yeah, this is probably basically where I land. I'd prefer transparency over vague attempts at neutrality. We've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes. I could have just said that. So well said. I very much agree with this, Lydia. I think there's a difference between publishing a book and censorship through the library. Many books I do not agree with, I specifically source through the library. Yeah. our cultural reverence for neutrality is always strange to me, especially in areas where it's straight up not possible. Yeah. I mean, especially like when it comes to things around like different marginalized identities, it's like, I can't, I mean, I guess I'll speak for myself. Like, I can't be neutral if somebody's like entire raison d'etre for publishing a book is talking about how like women should be subservient to men. Like, if there's a nonfiction book about that, like, I can't be neutral about it. And like acting like it's a flaw that I can't be, I think is not right. But I do think that our kind of like neoliberal whatever seems to like value that kind of like objectivity and neutrality and emotionlessness. I think that's the other thing that I've been working on my video essay about Jane Eyre, and I've been talking at the beginning of it. I talk about like different theory, like literary theories of interpretation for classics, and I kind of talk about both extremes of people who basically like want to throw the classics totally out, and then people who feel like any critique of the classics as being like problematic is just like being some weird snowflake or whatever. And like I do think that there's this assumption that if you have some sort of like personal stake in something, that automatically discounts your opinion, or like means that you being bothered by it somehow makes you like weaker intellectually or whatever. And I think that there are reasons to want to contextualize books that have been published in the past in the place of their time. Like, I think that there's a place for that, but I think acting like people who are hurt by those books or hurt by the things that are being discussed is somehow some sort of like intellectual or moral weakness on their part. I think that's a really like terrible bias in the way we talk about things in our culture, or at least in American culture. I'm like, yeah, like I take it personally. If somebody thinks like I don't deserve to have the same rights as them, like, yeah, I feel like it's okay for me to like take that personally. So yeah. I think trying this idea that like we can read things as some sort of detached emotionless robot is not productive. So yeah. Well, past Mara was trying to be good about the fact that I'm flaring and therefore need more sleep right now. But I really enjoyed this conversation with you guys. I know that's weird to say because I'm the only person actually talking, but I enjoy all your comments. It's been, I just always enjoy interacting with you guys and getting your perspectives on things. Next week, we do not have live stream, but there will be a video. What's going up next Tuesday? I think it's a video about like how I make videos. So very meta. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of like YouTube process videos recently of like how you, like how people make videos, and I've been watching that and enjoying it. So I thought I would make one of my own. So that's going up next Tuesday. But yeah, I appreciate everybody's discussion. This has been lovely. What if I'm a Capricorn sun and moon and am an emotionless robot? Well, I mean, you're only a double Capricorn. What's your rising? You have other places you can go. Yeah, I appreciate the chat, everybody. I heard anyone talking great conversations. Yes, I appreciate everyone sharing. We're validating your double Capricornness. Taurus. Oh, well. Oh, Tauruses are not emotionless. I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know where you're going. I guess you're going, you know what, like enjoying your own sensuousness. Maybe that's where you can live. This conversation is important that a lot of perspectives are published and counted, but we definitely don't have to accept or listen to those that discount human rights. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Capricorns unite. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys have a lovely evening, and I won't talk to you guys next week at live, but I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks. Forget what topic I've picked, but we'll see then. Bye.